Welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that can change everything. This is a place for you to bring those difficult conversations that you've been mulling over, that you've been thinking about while you've been walking around, doing the washing up or commuting to work. I'm Eve Stanway. I am a philosopher, psychotherapist of 25 years, divorce and breakup coach, and I help people in the moments where there's a difficult conversation they just don't know how to handle. This is a moment, your moment, to pause, reflect, and have a bit of breathing space to think about what matters to you and how to tackle those difficult moments. Using insight, reflection, case studies, and examples, I will guide you through those difficult conversations in a safe and constructive way. So let's begin. Hello and welcome to Dare to Speak, difficult conversations that change everything. As my regular listeners will know, I have been delighted to welcome on some guests to talk about their own lives and difficult conversations. And today I am welcoming Sam Johnson, who is a copywriter and the owner and founder of the Hook Book. Welcome today, Sam.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. Tell me a little bit about the Hook Book. It's an intriguing idea.
It stemmed from my notoriously short attention span. I've been a copywriter for some time now, about 10 years on and off. When someone gives me a business book that's about 60,000 words long and about this thick, I take it with the best intentions, but I'm unlikely to ever read it from start to finish because I've got a short attention span and I'm busy. So the plan was, could we find a way to make books for busy entrepreneurs, less than 10,000 words that can be read in less than an hour and only needs 1 hour of their time with me. And then I then ghostwrite the book. We design the covers. We print 100 copies that we box up and send to them. And it's their name on the cover, their IP, and it's cost a lot less than a normal book deal would.
That's so interesting. And I think that is a kind of acknowledging the time and the effort that it takes to write a book, and also from a business point of view, the reality of people actually reading it and getting the value out of that book. This is a difficult conversation for people to acknowledge that maybe going about it in another way is a really good way of considering doing it.
Yeah, and also there's the intimidation factor. A lot, the old cliche is everyone's got a book in them, and I do agree with that. But the intimidation of the blank page and someone saying, there you go, sit down, write me a book, is quite a challenge. Whereas if they just chat to me for an hour, I feel it's hopefully a lot less intimidating and more relaxed. And then we really kind of get to the crux of them and their story and their frameworks, which is exactly what we want in the book.
And I'm sure that sometimes that happens and it gives them the confidence to write and realise that they have got good ideas. Because I know myself, I was part of I was invited to participate in a chapter in another book and just write, I think it was 3,000 words, but writing those and going through that process really spurred me on to go and write my own book. So it's a good place to start as well, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And I mean, even numbers, if someone, an average book is 60,000 words, even for someone who writes for a living, that's quite intimidating. If someone said to me, sit down and write me 60,000 words, and of course, I don't use AI when I write them. So I think people find it a lot easier to have a chat than they do to sit down, start from scratch and tell their story.
It's such a useful thing. And I will be putting the links to your business in the show notes. So if anybody's hearing this and thinking, actually, that might be useful for me, you can connect with me, or you can connect with Sam, or you can just have a look at the show notes and connect up with him.
Awesome.
So that's really a useful thing, but we're not on specifically to talk about that. When we were talking, what came out when we were talking before this was you yourself, Sam, have had a number of difficult conversations, and certainly in your kind of road through parenting and through life in general, And I felt it would be really interesting to invite you on for what you're willing to share, because I think it's important that people are realizing that men are going through these things and experiencing things and reflecting and growing from life experience, which I think is perhaps not a narrative that's out there in the world enough at the moment.
I agree. You know, it's a stereotype. Men traditionally aren't great at opening up. We like to beat around the bush and talk about football and avoid the important stuff, especially men of my generation. So, yeah, I agree. And, I've learned a lot in the last 10, 15 years, and I've changed a lot. I mean, I'm still the same me, but I have really appreciated and respected the importance of being open about what you're going through.
Would you like to share a little bit of your story? Would you be okay?
Yeah, of course. Where would you like me to start?
From the good bits. No, start where you feel is relevant. I don't expect you to share your full life story, but I know that there must be some key learning points from the things you've experienced, because I know when I talk to men, again, of your age and around that, the way that they were raised and the expectations they had perhaps as a young person getting married or getting into relationships is quite different from how they see and experience relationships, healthy relationships these days.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with, I was married to my ex-wife for something around 15 years, I believe. I had 2 kids, and I realized that our relationship wasn't what it should be. I started to experience more of the world and see things I hadn't seen before. And I realized it wasn't right. So I left my ex-wife with the full intention of, staying in touch with my kids. Fortunately, that didn't happen. They were told pretty quickly that, your dad's not a good person. He wants to leave you, doesn't care about you. And so, cut a long story short, I went through the legal process, didn't get anywhere with that. And now I haven't seen them since I left 13 years ago.
Oh, wow. And that must be really hard for you.
It's extremely hard. I mean, I deal with it because life goes on, and however serious or how emotionally upsetting what you've been through is, that's a fact. You can't just sit around and wallow because things move on, and you have to pay the mortgage, and you have to do all that kind of mundane day-to-day stuff. I now also, as a result of that, I have 2 14-and-a-half-year-old twin stepsons who I have been parenting since they were 18 months old. So there's a focus required for that. And that's grown and changed, and my relationship with them has grown and changed and become something pretty special. I like to say they make me feel very old and very young at the same time. And I also like to say that I need to retire soon, because I have been parenting nonstop for the last 30 years. So I feel that, that's enough to make anyone bald and wrinkly. So, yeah, so that's where I am now. I met my current wife, Lisa. We got together. We had very little money because we were both coming out of divorces that had left us financially not very comfortable. And we managed to find a little house, and we moved in together and gone from there. And my wife's business has gone crazy, and, she's done extremely well, which has enabled us to move up and get a bigger house and, experience things that I certainly didn't experience as a kid. So that's that part. Yeah. I can't, there's still times when I find it hard, but what I do is talk about it, and I'm open about it, and I help other people who are going through similar things.
Yeah.
And obviously someone with your expertise would have been useful to have known you 13 years ago. But unfortunately, as you would know, Eve, in this country, parental alienation isn't actually seen as a real thing, whereas in the States it's used quite often in my situation. So that's why I didn't really have a leg to stand on when I did go to court, because my oldest boy was 15. They kind of said he's old enough to make his own decision. And then the younger one, decisions didn't go my way.
So I think it's really important, because I think it's certainly what I experienced. And I was raised, as it happens, when my parents divorced, I was placed with my dad. I don't know whether there was alienation that took place. I do believe it was a court decision. And so I was raised by him from the age of 7. And certainly I was asked quite recently, after my father passed away, when the obituary was written, that's a really unusual thing for you to have been placed with the kid, with the dad. Why did that happen? I don't know. I don't fully know those circumstances because I was too young. But what I do see in my work, and I work a lot with men, is I think there's almost a sense, there's surprise if a woman doesn't want to raise her children, and there's equally surprise if a dad does.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's new, but there certainly seems to be I don't know whether you experienced it that way, as if there's almost a conception that somehow dads, well, they just want to go and get on with their lives and they're not that bothered by their kids. And that's not what I hear at all.
I think cultural and historical influences in that, traditionally, it was the mum who brought up the kids, dad went out to work. But that certainly wasn't the case with me. Yes, we both went to work and I played a big part in bringing up my kids. But I think that kind of links quite well into where I am now, because my wife is the main breadwinner in our household. I work for her as well as running my own business as a copywriter. And the amount of men who ask me if I feel emasculated or if I feel, not worthy, or do I feel I should be going out and earning more money? And it fascinates me and it intrigues me and it baffles me at the same time, because I work in a world, mainly online businesses, and probably 90% of my clients are female. And I grew up with a very strong mother, very opinionated and focused mum who did a lot of stuff. Yeah, then I'm now married to an extremely passionate, intelligent, vocal, opinionated wife. And being surrounded by these strong women, it's never been an issue for me. I've never seen it like that. But I think especially in my generation, there are a lot of men who aren't so comfortable with it. And so I do have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis as well. I had one thing where I remember once I was talking to some blokes who came around to deliver some furniture, and they said, "What do you do?" I said, "I work for my wife." And they said, "Oh yeah, we all do that, mate." And I said, "No, I genuinely do work for my wife. She bought this house." And they were sort of flabbergasted, probably about my age, and they were totally taken aback. So there's certainly, historically, there has been that kind of opinion and that kind of movement, but I am vociferously trying to change that with the people that I'm around.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, what's interesting is that I know that when people make comments like that, like comments that they make towards women, there's no filter on those comments. They're often not really thinking about what they're saying, because there's a thing called received opinion, which is just the opinion that we walk around with, that we've got without knowing where we got it from.
Sure, yeah.
And challenging that received opinion, that it is, I mean, from any kind of sensible point of view, supporting the person who has the best income was what the historic basis was. It's just typically those incomes were really only available to men.
Yeah.
But actually the model is something that makes perfect sense, as does having two people on a team working to their strengths. So what I see a lot of time is when we recognize the good sense of your kind of arrangement and how it runs against the received opinion, which actually is completely nonsensical. It doesn't make sense.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And what you touched on there that I totally agree with is you utilize the skills you have as a couple. Because I've often thought, how does this pan out with same-sex couples then? What would they say about that? So, and in this world we live in, there's all sorts of different relationships that go on. And so I love that Lisa and I have complementary skills, and we are able to work together and live together and be husband and wife together because of those skills. There's certain things I like being a parent. I like being around kids and I like doing that kind of stuff. I'm a bit of a child at heart anyway. Now they're 14 and a half. They don't really want me as much, which is fine. So it gives me a bit more time to myself. And I like to cook. I like to, to do creative stuff. So why wouldn't I do those things? Because believe me, you wouldn't want Lisa cooking your dinner for you. I hope she doesn't. I'll be in big trouble. But I'm joking. But it's just an example of how, you're absolutely right that this kind of these thoughts we have that are ingrained in us subconsciously, subliminally, when you look at it logically, as you rightly say, it makes perfect sense.
It does make perfect sense, but it's also something else that I'm hearing, and this is what I hear from a lot of the dads and men that I work with, is this is giving you an opportunity, in a world where there is now two incomes in a lot of households, and I know that economics is difficult for some people, but to give people the opportunity to both play to their strengths and play to what they enjoy and be valued for that is the secret to a happy and harmonious relationship. It doesn't mean there won't be disagreements. There should always be disagreements. But what I see a lot, I see it a lot with couples where you've got one tired person plus another tired person, which is meant to cancel each other out instead of going, no, there's two tired people. If the division of labour was modified or adapted, you could be in a situation where you had two people who might be a bit fatigued, but they wouldn't be tired because they wouldn't be at competition with each other. And that allows those creative elements to come out, and it also allows fun and enjoyment. And what's crucial is appreciation. Because if you don't really like cooking and your spouse does like cooking, what a great opportunity to really appreciate that A, you don't have to do the cooking, and B, that they do the cooking. So you're bringing in that joy and that value into the relationship by exactly following the structure that you're following.
Yeah, I like that. I like that when you mentioned it, it's not a competition.
No.
And it's a team game, right? And so you're not competing against each other. And I think that's a really valid point to remember, that you both want the same end goals, right? You want a happy life, you want a contented life, you want a comfortable life. All these things that are at the very top of our needs. That's what you need. And the best way to get them is by working together.
Yeah, teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. But it is something that isn't built in. So when you were a young man growing up, I'm going to assume did you always feel this way, or was it different when you were growing up?
A bit different, because it was a different world. I stand very firmly in the camp that I never stop learning. I've got friends who still use the same language we used when we were teenagers, say the same things that we said when we were teenagers, in circumstances where it's not acceptable to me, because I've grown and I've learned. And so when I was growing up, I did, as I touched on earlier, I did have a very strong mum, a very confident mum who worked non-stop and did everything she could for us as kids. So I did have that in my locker, whereas a lot of people had a more traditional. I had parents for the day who were unusual. They never slapped me or hit me or anything, which was very unusual around my friend circle when I was growing up. So they were bordering on the world of, I would use the word hippie. They were pretty chill. So I had that. But of course, we're all affected by the media. We're all affected by what we read. We're affected by social norms and societal norms. And so when I was growing up, I wouldn't say I'm where I am now, but I think I was in a good place to get there. What I did have in between then and now is 20 years in a kind of what we would call traditional relationship, where I went to work, she looked after the kids, I took the boys to football, the kind of things that were traditional dad stuff.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn that wasn't how it had to be. So when I got with Lisa, I also had a very different relationship. It was based on conflict. And if we disagreed on something, we would generally shout at each other and call each other names and bring up something from 6 months ago, that we thought would cut. And when I first started seeing Lisa, we were disagreeing on something, and I was shouting, and she said, "Why are you shouting?" I said, "Because I disagree with you." And she said, "Well, that's fine, but why are you shouting?" And that really opened my eyes up. And none of us is perfect. And there were times when I'd lose my temper and times when I say things I regret. But I've certainly changed and learned from being around powerful, intelligent, ambitious women on the whole that I work with.
It's so important that, because, a lot of this is the podcast is called Dare to Speak. And a lot of the work that I do is by encouraging people to have their voice. having your voice doesn't mean shouting and screaming at each other, but what it does do, I mean, it sounds like Lisa did, is just ask you a very straightforward question. What you're doing? Why are you doing it this way? Being able to do that is the key to opening up our mind to the idea that there are different ways of doing this. And I choose to work in this field, and I choose to work a lot with men, because what I can see is that the opportunities for men to learn that there are different ways of doing these things is quite hard, because in terms of the resources out there, people you can talk to and say, I'd like to be slightly different, what can I do? In terms of male role models, you know, you are a male role model for this, and you will be for your children. Those male role models are actually quite hard to find at the moment. I mean, that's one
reason. And if we also factor in the less positive male role models.
Yes, those.
We don't want to dive into the manosphere, but, you know, kids who feel disenfranchised, who don't feel appreciated, who are going through their teenage years when all sorts of stuff is going on in their bodies and their minds, they're easily influenced, you know, and that's why, like I say, don't get me wrong, I get a lot wrong, but I try very hard to bring up my kids to understand these things, to understand that there is different ways, that you don't have to do. You can still be a man. You can grow into a man and be a masculine man, and you can have all this stuff, but you can do it in the right way. And if you get your fundamentals right of respect, of tolerance, of understanding, of discussion, of debate, all these things that I feel are kind of, I'm sounding like an old man now, but I feel like the ability to debate is a dying art. Because we disagree doesn't mean we have to argue. But I think extremism in all walks of life, politically, social media, extremism seems to be the way. You're either right on the left or you're right over on the right, and there's nothing in the middle.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that I remember here, I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been a politician, one of the older school politicians, saying the sign of intelligence is being able to consider two opposing views without collapsing. There is something, and you know, the kind of the cult of the individual, but also this idea of the being wrong is a loss of power, or loss of face, that we somehow lose something when we're wrong, instead of knowing that when we're wrong, we're learning. That there are other points of view, or that when somebody sees something differently than how we do it. So I see this a lot. My next book is about difficult conversations with young adults. And one of the things that I found with my own children is partly because I was raised by a very, very volatile parent, and he was very volatile and argumentative. I will tell you now, he didn't want to be wrong. But I have that in me. So when I get challenged by my children, which I actively encourage them to do, I'm then challenged by the fact that sometimes they're right and I'm wrong. And the whole world gets upset because you're older and therefore you're meant to be wiser, but I'm older and I'm not wiser, because actually they are wiser because they were raised better than I was raised. And also they actually understand emotional regulation very differently from how I was taught it. So I've had to so many times, like, kind of walk around the garden and accept that I am the deregulated one. I am the problem. And
That's a tough one, isn't it? That's a tough one to accept, because there is an element of, you know, I've been on this earth 56 years. I know more than you do. And it's the old in Matilda, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm big, you're small, I'm clever, you're stupid, you know, and it is difficult. And especially when they get to teenage years and they're intelligent and they're articulate and they're, you know, opinionated. But that's a massive thing to embrace. I don't think I ever apologized to my actual sons, ever. With the boys now, my stepsons, I make a really big point. If I've said something or done something, I'll go away and think about it. And I think, you know what, didn't handle that very well. I make a real point of going in and saying, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry I acted in this way, but I am a human being, and we all cock up, and you know, and it wasn't said with malice or anything like that. And I'm sorry, and I'll do my best not to do it again. And that's a massive learning.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good modelling for kids, because it's allowing them to know You know, there was that old thing, wasn't there? Do as I say, not as I do. But being able to flip that and say, do as I do, and sometimes understand that actually, there was another saying, I do like a saying, the man who never made a mistake, and this could be the woman who never made a mistake, never made anything. And I always think the first steak was cooked because someone dropped it on the fire and went, damn, that smelled good. So, you know, making mistakes is the way forwards. Acknowledging them is so important.
Yeah, learning from them, isn't it? I know it's an old management cliche that they're not mistakes, they're learnings. I always think a bit David Brent, but it's true. You can take a learning from everything, and it's about reframing it. I say that to the kids. Something bad happens, all right, this has happened. What are we going to learn from it? What are we going to learn from it so the next time we do it differently, or we do it better, or we do it more in a more opportune way?
That is part of your reason to be able to do that, I believe, is because you're regulated enough not to become emotionally dependent on the children's success. So sometimes you have parents who are, and I've been like this myself. I remember when my son was swimming and he didn't make one of his Essex times, and I found myself that I was so emotionally invested in him succeeding and not feeling bad about not succeeding that I forgot that he was feeling bad about not succeeding, and my job was to support him and be there, not to have a go at him for not kicking hard enough. And I think what you said earlier is really crucial, that ability to keep learning. For men that I see, and for women actually, because I'm going to say this is the same for everyone, being able to accept failure is feedback, being able to accept the feedback of not succeeding in order to learn is a crucial part of developing. And if we can't tolerate failure, we'll be wrong.
I mean, it's a tricky one for me because I am by nature hugely competitive. Everything I do. If I'm playing Monopoly, I want to win. If I'm mucking about football in the back garden with the kids, I want to win. And so this was a massive learning for me. At the time of my life when everything changed 13 years ago, I stopped working in boring corporate management jobs that I'd had for 25 years. I moved away from my family. I had to start from scratch. It's massive learnings, and I hate losing at anything. So, and initially I would see if I did something wrong and the kids did something right, I'd lost. And so I had to reframe that into exactly what you're just saying, to absorb it, to take it in, to dissect it, to see that it's a learning and to see what I can do next time. But I'm still hugely competitive and I still react the wrong way often because, life's a challenge, bringing up two teenagers.
Yeah, and I think what I'm hearing there, which is incredibly balanced in your view, is competing with your own children or competing with your own spouse or competing with those who are part of your team. I mean, friendly competition is all very well. Come on, let's see how quickly we can tidy up the room. Is one thing. But when it moves into that kind of competitiveness with your own family, with your own spouse, with your own children, with your own friends, in that moment, it becomes toxic. Because competition is meant to have rules. You're meant to qualify and you're meant to make sure you're all at the same space. Not competing with children or not needing children to compete on part of us is, if I could get rid of that in society and teach people don't compete with your kids. I know the urge to. I want to as well. I'm really, really competitive. It's like choose who you compete with because they're not your enemy. They're your friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or your child or your spouse or whoever.
Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? It's a balance because you want them to understand that competition is a part of life and will always be a part of life. If you go for a job interview, it's basically a competition. But it's getting that balance between them understanding that, but all of us to learn that it won't be positive in any form of relationship or any form of household or situation.
Yeah, well, I think it was Roger Federer who said that he can be a world champion by making 52% of his shots. He can lose the other 48% and still be better than everybody else. Yeah. And I think it was him that said that. And that always stuck with me, that we don't have to win every We don't have to win every interaction. What we're doing is that we're looking at winning at life, winning at the relationship, winning at those things. So I'm going to say thank you, Sam, for sharing. This is so useful and so valuable, to hear you talk about this, because these are the kind of voices that they're not getting out there enough, in my view, just talking about this stuff, which is, also deeply affecting for you. So thank you for that. Is there any single nugget that you would leave? Is there about these kind of how we tackle these difficult conversations and kind of face up to these life changes?
Yeah, it's almost a little microcosm of the people, especially men of my age, and how they brought up to deal with this kind of stuff, or not deal with it, or compartmentalize it as much as they can and lock the door. We're all prone to that. My biggest thing I touched on earlier is we never stop learning. And that's so applicable to me now. Every day, something. And I don't mean, always massive stuff. It can be little things, So I think if you stop learning, you might as well just stop, because then you're just going to stay that same person forever. And what a waste. What a waste of all those years that you've got. We don't get that many. What an opportunity to find out new stuff, to learn new things, to meet different people. I mean, my job now is basically having conversations with amazing people. You couldn't make it up, could you? If I couldn't be a footballer or a rock star, that was probably number 3 on the list. Just having a chat, learning about brilliant people and writing their books. I mean, I've learned that in the last couple of years. So that proves the point.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. The human brain is designed to evolve. It carries on going through developmental phases all the way through our life till we die. So utilizing that and understanding that, being wrong about something doesn't break you as a person. It doesn't take away, it doesn't mean you're a bad person or a good person. It's not a moral judgment. It's progress. It's learning. So thank you, Sam.
Pleasure. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been really, really good to chat. So as I said at the top, if you want to get in touch with Sam, his details will be on the show notes, or just reach out to me if you're connected with me and you're getting this, and I will put you in touch with Sam to get your own hookbook written. And yeah, thank you very much, Sam.
No worries. Thanks, Heath. Thanks for having me.